Luke chapter 8. We all have a story to tell. Sometimes the story that we tell has a moral meaning. Sometimes the story that we tell is simply something that is pleasant to the ears with no real significance. Frequently, we have a story to tell when we think about the birth of a grandchild. I have mentioned this before, and it certainly is the case that Anne has enough exuberance in her life to make up for the lack of exuberance in my life when it comes to excited. Me, I just mow the lawn. But as you think about it, we have a story to tell. And whatever the story is, it's important for us to say it. Here in Luke chapter 8, verses 26 and following, as you think about this parable, or actually not this parable, but this miraculous occasion, the thrust of the entirety of the message is to be found near the end. He had a story to tell. And what I want you to focus with me on this morning as we read the entirety of this account would be in verses 26 through 39, is how this man had a story to tell. Then they sailed to the country of the Gadarenes, which is opposite Galilee. When he stepped out on the land, there met him a certain man from the city who had demons for a long time. And he wore no clothes, nor did he live in a house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out, fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man, for it had often seized him, and as he was kept under guard, bound with chains and shackles, he broke the bonds and was driven by the demons into the wilderness. Jesus asked him, saying, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," because many demons had entered him, and they begged him that he would not command them to go into the abyss. Now a herd of many swine was feeding there on the mountain. So they begged him that he would permit them to enter them, and he permitted them. Then the demons went out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd ran violently down the steep place into the lake and drowned. When those who fed them saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then they went out to see what had happened and came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demon had departed, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. They also who had seen it told them by what means he who had been demon-possessed was healed. Then the whole multitude of the surrounding region of the Gadarenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear, and he got into the boat and returned. Now the man from whom the demons had departed begged him that he might be with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your own house and tell what great things God has done for you." And he went his way and proclaimed throughout the whole city what great things Jesus had done for him. So as you look at the last verse of our reading, you can see the thrust of what it is that we want to come to understand. You have a story to tell. This man had a story to tell. And if you have a story to tell, you should tell it. You are willing to tell of the story that's important to you, whatever it is in your life, to somebody else if you gather that they might have an interest in it. And it may be sometimes you will tell them the story because it's of more interest to you than it is to them, and they politely listen to you, and perhaps they joy with you or they sorrow with you. But you have a story to tell. And when you think about an application, simple application, which will be that which I will repeat a little bit later on, you have a story to tell concerning that which the Lord had done for you. I have told you my story a number of times. Some of you have told me your story. Probably not a number of times. I will do it frequently because it illustrates a very important part of time in my life back in 1983. But as you think about what we have here in Luke chapter 8, I want you to take note of three things right here. Number one, a defeated man. Number two, a delivered man. And number three, a directed man. Consider with me verses 26 through 29, and this man who was a defeated man. Then they sailed into the country of the Gadarenes, which is opposite Galilee. That would essentially be on the east side of the Jordan River. they stepped out on the land, there met him a certain man from the city who had demons for a long time, and he wore no clothes, nor did he live in a house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out, fell down, and with a loud voice said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." And I'll say a word about that here momentarily. For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man, for it often seized him, and he was kept under guard, bound with chains and shackles, and he broke the bonds and was driven by the demon into the wilderness. Now what you have here is simply pretty clear. You have an extraordinary circumstance of a man who was controlled by a force greater than himself. His name was Legion. That would be those who were actually residing in him. And how many would that be? The common number is roughly 6,000. But whether the number is 5,600 or 6,000, this man was controlled by demons. Now, why would this man be controlled by demons? You can say a number of reasons as to why, going back to the book of Zechariah, but at the very least, I can tell you why this man was controlled by demons. Because he lived in a dark world. And when you operate in a dark world and you accept the influences of the dark world, you are going to be controlled or influenced, at the very least in our day and time, influenced by demon thinking. You simply will be, you cannot overcome it. As you think about 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 13 through 15, Satan turns himself into an angel of light, and he is the god of this world, and he actually controls the way of thinking that many people operate by. Satan is a powerful foe, and if there are those who think that they can overcome him based upon their own intellect, based upon their own will, they are sadly mistaken, and it will be but a short time when they come to realize this. But you'll note right here that this man was a defeated man. As soon as he sees Jesus, he's in horror at what he sees when he sees Jesus. Just like you would be in horror at what you see when you are startled by something that you were not expecting. I mean, the startling would be of such a magnitude that some would just simply scream and run away because they were so startled by it. And the demon, when he saw Jesus, he was immediately horrified by what it was that he saw. And so you'll note there in verse 28, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Note that this demon knew who Jesus was, or this man who was controlled by the demons knew who Jesus was. Knowing Jesus is important. But if you know Jesus and don't do anything about it, that knowledge will not benefit you too much. You might be able to have a conversation with somebody who doesn't know Jesus. You might have a conversation with somebody who might know Jesus a little bit. But if you have not made him your story, it will not do you very much at all. But you'll take note, not only was this man horrified by what he saw when he saw Jesus coming to him, note there with me in verse 27. "And he stepped out on the land, met a certain man from the city who had demons, and this man wore no clothes." Now, literally? Well, that's what it says. This man wore no clothes, nor did he live in his own home, but he lived in the tombs. And to live in the environment where people are buried to a Jewish community was something, you don't go around that. You don't go around that at all. People don't go around it much today because there is something about it, there's something sacred about a cemetery. You just don't go around it. You might go there to give attention to perhaps a loved one. I went up to Marion, Marcel's, yesterday to visit the grave of my mother and father. The road was blocked. What would I do once I arrived? I would stand there, I would look, I would reflect, I would reminisce, and as I always do, I would say a prayer. But as you think about a cemetery, there's just some things that you don't do, and one of them is live or play in a cemetery unless you have not been taught how to be respectful to those who are deceased. But you'll see there in verse 27, this man was a defeated man. He was controlled by something greater than himself. And sees Jesus. He's horrified by what he sees. He does not know what it is that's going to occur. And so he appeals to Jesus. Don't send me into the abyss or out of the country. Don't send me into the deep realm where no one will see or no one will know. And Jesus sees this man, sees how he is controlled by a force greater than himself, and so he sets himself to deliver the man. Note this with me in 30 and following. Jesus asked him, saying, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," because many demons had entered him, and they begged him that he would not command them to go into the abyss. Now a herd of many swine was feeding there on the mountain. So, so they begged him that he would permit them to enter into them, and he permitted them. Then the demons went out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd ran violently down the steep place into the lake and drowned. When those who had fed them saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then they went out to see what had happened and came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had departed sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. I'm going to stop right there and simply reflect upon what it is that occurred. Jesus set himself to deliver this man. This man was horrified, who was controlled by the demons, and Jesus said, "What is your name?" And the name was given. And they appealed to Jesus, "Do not send us into a realm where you might send us. Don't send us there." Note the appeal that the demons had. They looked at the Son of God, and they knew instantly that they were not going to control him, but that he was going to control them. And so they appealed to him, "Don't send us into the abyss." He could have done so. But he permitted them to go into the herd of swine. Frequently, people will read that, and that's all they'll remember about what it is that we see here in Luke chapter 8, verses 26 through 29. Why did Jesus send this herd of swine into the water? Well, Jesus didn't. It was the fact that Jesus permitted them to go where they wanted to go, and so they went. And whatever reason the Lord used to allow this to occur, one thing is for certain, and I think this is something you need to be mindful of. The value of one soul is greater than a herd of swine, upwards of 2,000. Whether it was cattle, whether it was swine, whether it was any other kind of beast of the field, the value of one soul to the Lord was of more importance than the value of a herd. And if you gain nothing from the lesson, you can gain that by itself, and that will be something that will stay with you the remainder of your days. But here, Jesus sends them or allows them to go into the swine, and of course the swine ran violently down into the lake, and they all drowned. And of course the people come out and they are looking about what is going on, and they cannot understand what it is going on, and because they cannot understand what it is that's going on, they are gripped with fear. And when you don't understand, you begin to do things that you wouldn't otherwise do. They didn't understand that Jesus was a powerful man for the good, unlike this man who was controlled by demons, who was actually being possessed for that which is bad. Surely because Jesus was able to overcome that which was bad, then he is more powerful than that which is bad. Maybe he'll do us harm. That would be the community perhaps thinking that. But whether they thought that or not, they were gripped with fear, and so they decided to appeal to Jesus to go. Now Jesus could have resisted them, but he didn't. He decided to go. But when you think about that which is occurring here in verses 30 through 37, when you are controlled by something you don't understand, your mind begins to speculate. And then things are thought, things are said, deeds are done. And you don't realize that perhaps what you had in front of you was something that you'll never have again because you didn't understand and you sent it away. Well, this man, though he was tormented like he was, here he was delivered. Note this with me in verse 35. Then they went out to see what had happened, and came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had departed, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Think about the ones with whom Jesus interacted. Not only did he interact with this one who was controlled by demons because he had healed him, but in chapter 7 you can take note that he actually was interacting with a sinful woman. Or you can take note in later on in this chapter how he was actually giving attention to a desperate father. Or even a little bit further in this chapter, a desperate woman who had given all of her money away to be healed, only to not be healed at all. or in chapter 16, or rather chapter 17, how he dealt with a Samaritan woman. Jesus dealt with people that many others would ostracize and kept themselves separated from. Not Jesus, because there was value in one soul. You see, Jesus delivered him. This man was a defeated man, but Jesus delivered this man. And now, thirdly, this morning, Jesus gave this man direction in life. Note this with me in verse 38 and 39. Excuse me. Now the man from whom the demons had departed begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, Return to your own house and tell what great things God has done for you. And he went his way and proclaimed throughout the whole city what great things Jesus had done for him. This man had a story to tell. And what could he tell? Well, you can read the context and see what it was that he could tell. But note this with me in these series of contrasts that I want to share with you. Look at verse 27. Note this with me in verse 27. The man who was healed could say something about this, that he was one who actually was demon-possessed, but now he was free of those possessions that were actually destroying him. You'll take note also there in verse 27 that he was a man who actually was controlled for a long period of time, but now he was relieved of all this, and he had freedom in the immediacy of the time in which he was able to say something about it. Or you look at verse 27 once again, and you can take note that this man wore no clothes. But as you look at verse 35, he was one who was actually clothed. He was wearing no clothes. Now he was in his right mind, and he was fully clothed. Or you look at also verse 27, and here was a man who did not live in a house, but he lived in the tombs. But then as you look, Jesus said, go to your house. When you're on a long trip, and you know you're going to return to your home, the anticipation of getting home, does it mean something to you? I know it does to us. Probably it does to you. This man had no home. He was all by himself in the tombs, and Jesus said, go to your home. What did he go to? Did he go to an empty house? Did he go to a family that was welcoming him because they had come to learn what happened to him? What did he go to? But he went to his home. And then as you look with me, note this with me in verse, 29. Well, 29 is over here, rather. Note this with me in verse 29. For he commanded the unclean spirit to come out of him, for it had seized him, it controlled him. Control. That is the operative word for those who want power, whether it's in the political realm, whether it's in a family situation, whether it's in the spiritual realm. That word, control, is the operative word. If I can control you, I can have you do what it is that I want you to do. And this man who was controlled by demons was doing that which was controlling him. And Jesus took that which was controlling him and gave him liberty, gave him freedom. You see, this man had a story to tell. And it was a story that was a powerful story. Now, your experience in life may not be the same as that which we read right here in Luke chapter 8. But you've got a story to tell. And people will hear you. Some people will hear you respectfully, but not really be all that interested. Some people will hear you respectfully and be very much interested in it. Some people will not know exactly how to respond to it, but you might say something to them that will catch their attention, and they may ask something of you a little bit more. You've got a story to tell. This week, of course, giving thought to our house-to-house, heart-to-heart school of evangelism, our effort to actually try to evangelize the community, you've got a story to tell. That story begins with your response to the Lord Jesus Christ. And without that beginning, you'll have no end that you'll desire to have. You've got to have that beginning. You've got a story to tell. It really begins with your response. Do you believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God? Do you believe that he came and he died for you? Will you change your way of thinking with regard to the life that you have chosen to live and now live for him? Will you acknowledge him as your Lord? Will you die with him in baptism? Will you walk with him the remainder of your days? You've got a story to tell. Not everybody will listen to it, but there'll be one. And that one will make a difference because of you. This morning, if you need to respond, and you know whether you do or not, if you have a desire to respond, and you know whether you do or not, we encourage you to respond to the invitation while together we stand and sing.